Hello my friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ariana and here on this channel we discuss all things breathwork, nervous system health, holistic well-being, entrepreneurship, and a little bit of life stuff sprinkled in here and there. Today I'm answering the question, is breathwork safe during pregnancy? And this isn't a question with a clear and easy answer. So my hope is that with what I share with you today, that you'll be able to make an informed decision to decide whether it's right for you or not. Part of why I wanted to talk about this today is it's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. You might not be able to tell because it's kind of hard to see with black on black, but I'm currently just over 36 weeks pregnant. And so I thought, what better time to talk about breathwork and pregnancy when you're pregnant. So, is breathwork safe during pregnancy? Well, the answer is kind of vague, and it's an answer that I provide to a lot of questions when folks ask, should I do this or should I do that? Is this better or is that better? And that answer is, it depends. And it depends on a whole lot of things. And what I want to say right at the start of this video is that there are actually very few studies done about breathwork and pregnancy, and really about breathwork in general. You know, Wim Hof has started to bring breathwork more into the mainstream conversation, and fortunately we have had some studies done about how breathwork impacts the immune system, the nervous system, all of those kinds of things thanks to Wim Hof. But Wim Hof style of breathwork is also a little bit different than conscious connected breathwork, which is what I'll be talking about. And as I said in my first video, what is breathwork? We also know that breathwork is an umbrella term for a number of different breathing techniques. So when I say breathwork, I'm referring to conscious connected breathwork. But when somebody else says breathwork, they might be referring to just a pranayama exercise that you might experience in a yoga class. And there will definitely be some differences around the safety of, say, box breathing, which is breathing in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, then dropping into an hour-long conscious connected breathwork session. So things to keep in mind here is that there are very few scientific studies done about the safety of breathwork and pregnancy. And also, when we are looking at this, what kind of breathwork are we looking at? For today's purposes, it's conscious connected breathwork, but if you're doing your research, make sure that you're aware of what type of breathwork the research or study or person is talking about. Now, as a general rule of thumb, you know, when we look at things from a health and wellness perspective, a lot of folks give the common advice to not try anything new during pregnancy. So if you were not running before you got pregnant, maybe don't use your pregnancy as the time to start running, especially because your pelvic floor might feel a little uncomfortable as you continue on. It has been suggested that if you weren't strength training prior to pregnancy, you shouldn't start strength training during your pregnancy. And this is very well-meaning and well-intentioned advice, and I do believe it to an extent. However, you know, if you weren't active at all prior to pregnancy, it would be really beneficial for you to be a little bit more active during your pregnancy to help your body prepare for the demands of both carrying a human being as well as delivering that human being. It's the same thing with breathwork. You know, when I think about it, if someone has never done a full conscious connected breathwork session, I personally would probably not take somebody on as a client if they're in, say, their second or third trimester. What we might do is look at practicing some maybe relaxation breathing techniques. We could do a shorter time frame, so maybe 15 to 20 minutes of breathing as opposed to 60 minutes. But if it's something that you have never experienced before, I personally, as a facilitator, would really want to have a conversation with you and ask you, what's your intention for wanting to explore breathwork during your pregnancy? Have you done a lot of work around connecting with your emotions? What are your fears around pregnancy and giving birth? What's your relationship to trauma? All of these things are really important to have an understanding of before we go into the breath, whether we're pregnant or not, but especially during pregnancy, so that we can start to get an understanding of what might come through and up in the session. Now, what I will say is that breathwork is unpredictable. I've gone in wanting to have big emotional releases and I've had really peaceful, blissful sessions. On the flip side, I've wanted to drop in just to relax, and some emotions have inevitably come up that have needed to be released. So we can't predict what will happen based off of our questioning beforehand. But I could safely assume that if somebody is wanting to come in because they have some heavy trauma that they're wanting to work with and release prior to having a baby, that there could be some big emotional movements coming up. There could be some big pieces to navigate. And why is this important to consider? Well, we know that stress during pregnancy impacts the baby. We don't know the means by which that happens though. Is it because of hormonal responses that are impacting the baby? Is it because stress leads to tension in the body that the baby inadvertently picks up on? Is it because our attention is being drawn away from caring for this life growing inside of us and being placed upon the stressor? Or is it due to another reason? We don't actually know the mechanisms for that. It could be the sounds and the movements that the mother makes when she's undergoing periods of stress. And so this is important to keep in mind, because as we're navigating a breathwork session and if we are experiencing some releasing of emotions, of trauma, of stored memories that are wanting to exit the body, is it the emotions themselves that could potentially impact the baby? Is it the hormonal releases that our body experiences as we go through these emotional releases that could impact the baby? Could it be the sounds, the crying, the screaming, the yelling, whatever it may be that happens during your breathwork session? I can say personally, in my own experience with breathwork through pregnancy, I've not had any big emotional releases. That hasn't been my intention going in. However, I did really struggle in the first few months of my pregnancy. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety. I was crying for seemingly no reason at all, sometimes for hours on end. I experienced a few panic attacks, and it was really challenging for me after having moved through those things, because I was maybe no longer experiencing the anxiety around the thing I was anxious about. But then I was thinking, how did that impact Babe? Did she pick up on that? Did she feel that? Did she feel unsafe because of what I was experiencing? So while that's definitely something to consider, another important side of the coin is, what are the potential consequences, for lack of a better word, of not moving these things prior to Babe coming into the world? Could the not releasing of these things potentially impact your chances of having a smooth and easeful birth? Could they impact your ability to show up for your newborn baby, to show up with your mothering energy, to really be that supportive nurture that this new life you've created needs? These are things we need to look at. Is it more beneficial to hold off on that breathwork session until after Babe is born, when you're not as physically connected? There still is a lot of physical connection, but not as physically connected, in order to move through whatever it was that needed to be moved through? Or would we want to give ourselves that opportunity to clear those things before Babe comes? Again, this isn't something that I can answer for somebody. This is something that you would have to answer on your own. So it takes a lot of self-exploration and a lot of self-honesty to discern whether this is something that you feel would be beneficial for you or not. Something that's also important to note is that I did a little bit of my own research before filming this video. And what I found from a few different styles of breathwork is that they encourage pregnant women to not do it for a few of the different physiological reasons. But one of them being that a woman can go back into her own birth experience. This is something that can happen during breathwork. You essentially work through your own birth trauma. Individuals can experience their own rebirth. Some have spoken of feeling themselves coming through their mother's womb and coming back out into the world. And there is a belief that if a pregnant woman is experiencing this, that this could potentially induce preterm labor. Now, again, there are no studies that prove whether this is right or not, but I had signed up for an online breathwork session, not realizing it was holotropic breathwork, which is definitely a more intense style of breathwork than what I work with my clients. And when I got the email and they advised against doing it because of those reasons, because holotropic breath work is something that I'm not super experienced in, I opted to not do it. But that being said, breath work during pregnancy can be a beautiful and restoring practice for mama. I've been enjoying breath work throughout the majority of my pregnancy, and especially now as I lean into my last month or so, I'm really feeling called to spend a lot of time with my breath and to go inwards. And I'll speak from my own intention while saying that this is not necessarily the right way to do it or the only way that you can do it, but I've viewed breathwork as a way to not necessarily work through fears and emotions and things like that in this last leg of my pregnancy, but more as an opportunity to connect more deeply with myself, with my body, and with this little human that's growing inside of me. It gives me a beautiful break in the middle of my day to really just not have to do anything. It's incredibly nourishing for my nervous system, which inadvertently becomes nourishing for a baby's nervous system. And it does allow me to gain some clarity, to allow creative ideas to flow through because, you know, I am an entrepreneur and I do have to show up and create things. And right now in this last little bit of pregnancy and realistically through most of my pregnancy, my creativity's not fully been there. And I think it's because it's going towards this little nugget. And this bigger nugget apparently likes to spend a lot of time with me while I'm filming. So she might be here for the next little bit. But you know, I say those things as somebody who has a lot of experience with breathwork. I have done my breathwork facilitator training. I've been very active within the world of breathwork for the last few years. And so it's been relatively easy for me to have a solo self-guided practice that is more gentle and restorative. So if you are feeling called to drop into the breath during your pregnancy, my suggestion would be to either practice a breathing exercise that's more of like a pranayama technique, maybe something a little bit shorter, and I'll actually share one that's really great that can help your body prepare for birth. So stay tuned for that. But my other piece of advice would be if you're wanting to explore something a little bit longer, 15, 20 minutes, maybe even up to 60 minutes, find a facilitator or a professional who is trained in breathwork that can support you in having a safe and comfortable experience. What we really want to do is continuously reinforce the notions of safety and relaxation during breathwork. In one of my videos, I do talk about how things can get a little bit uncomfortable during breath work. There can be some different physical sensations that arise, things that we're maybe not used to. And a lot of that really can be remedied by relaxing into the breath, by not resisting what might be coming up, what you're experiencing. And it's a lot easier to find that surrender and relaxation when you are with a trained facilitator. And what a beautiful way to prepare your body and your being for the birth and arrival of a little babe here on planet Earth by learning how to relax and surrender into what is. If you're pregnant and if you've done any exploration around labor preparation or anything like that, you'll likely have heard how important the breath is. And so if you can start to cultivate a deeper connection with your breath during pregnancy in a way that is safe and supportive, it really could set you up for the possibility of a more easeful, we'll say, labor. Not necessarily easy, but we may be able to be experiencing less resistance. We may be able to surrender into what is just a little bit more. So what I'll share as well is that, you know, if you want to try even just a few minutes of breath work, in the notes below here, I do have a link to a 10-minute breath session that you can do on your own. It's super, super safe because it's on the shorter side. You know, you're not really going to get too deep. Still really great for your nervous system and for giving yourself and your body a bit of a chance to relax. And what I'll do now is I'll show you a way that you can set your body up a little bit differently based on where you are in your pregnancy, because breath work is typically practiced laying on the back. And for a lot of women, that's not super comfortable the further along we get into pregnancy. So what I like to do for either myself or my clients who I'm working with is have them prop up a bunch of pillows against either a couch or the bed. Always make sure that when you are going to lie down on your side and then roll yourself around to your back. And then in this way, you're a little bit more upright. I like to keep the knees bent with my feet a little bit wider, knees falling in together. And this just feels like a really nice, comfortable, and supportive position. And then from here, you would drop into the breath in your regular way. So breathing in and out through the mouth, breathing into the belly, into the heart, and then letting it drop. Something else that you can do is breathe on your side. So here I have my bottom leg straight, my top knee is bent, and that top leg is supported by a pillow. You can use a regular pillow or a pregnancy pillow, and just place your arms however feels comfortable. Like, this is a really nice passive position, but what's really great about it is that you can really breathe into your back and your rib cage, which if you are pregnant, you likely know how tight things can get in there. So bringing in some breath can really free up some space in those areas. Okay, so there's two different breathing exercises that I want to share with you, and they're very similar, and one of them essentially just builds off of the other. And so the first is the 360-degree breath. And what this does is it teaches us to use our full torso here. So we're not just breathing into the belly, we're not just breathing into the chest, we're really using the diaphragm, the belly, and the chest to allow for a full expansion and connection with our breath. So what I invite you to do is to start by placing your fingertips on the front of your rib cage and then your thumb on the back of your rib cage. And as you inhale, I want you to feel your hands start to come wider. That means that your rib cage is going to expand. So we're going to take a big breath in. Ribs are expanding, and then we exhale and just soften. Again, inhale, ribs expand. Exhale, they soften. And this just starts to teach us to breathe using the diaphragm. You know, oftentimes if we're not conscious of our breath, we tend to breathe quite shallow. And then maybe as we start to do more yogic practices or we hear about belly breathing, we start to breathe through the belly, but we're still missing out on that movement through the diaphragm. And it's really important, especially as we go through our pregnancy, to have that movement happening because there's not a lot of space for movement. So we need to be intentional about that. So that's your 360-degree breath. The next exercise kind of builds off of that, and it's from the book, The Fourth Trimester, written by Kimberly Ann Johnson. This is a great book. It was gifted to me by my doula. I highly encourage any pregnant woman to pick it up and read it. She even says in the book that even if you had a baby 10 years ago, you could still benefit from the practices in this book. And while the majority of the book is about setting yourself up for a easeful recovery from birth and really nourishing yourself and your system after giving birth, there are a few birth practices or birth preparation practices in here, and this breath for length, which I'm about to show you, is in there. So similarly to how in the 360-degree breath we want to breathe with the ribs, that's essentially what we're doing here, but it's almost like we are unzipping on the way down. So we're expanding first in the ribs and then in the diaphragm and then in the pelvic floor, and then we're going to zip our way back up. So we're going to then lift and pull in the pelvic floor, in through the abdominals, and then in through the rib cage. So I'll walk it through while pretending to do it and not actually doing it, and then I'll show you what it could look like, although you might actually not see a whole lot. So again, we could have fingertips on rib cage, thumbs on the back of the ribs. And as I start to take an inhale, I'm going to maintain slight engagement in my abdominals as I breathe in and expand through the ribs. And then I'm going to allow my belly to expand. And then I'm going to allow my pelvic floor, my muscles of the low pelvis, to just expand and drop. The inhale is when the pelvic floor relaxes. So again, I'm going to inhale, expand the ribs, expand the belly, let the pelvic floor relax and drop. It's really hard to do this and dog at the same time. Now on the exhale, I'm going to start by lifting the pelvic floor, engaging the abdominals, and then letting the ribs soften. So I exhale, lift the pelvic floor, engage the abdominals, relax the ribs. Inhale. Out of breath here because there's a baby pushing up against my lungs. So I need to just catch my breath for a moment. So I'm going to inhale, expand the ribs, expand the abdominals, let the pelvic floor relax. Exhale, lift the pelvic floor, engage the abdominals, relax the ribs. Let's do that again. Inhale, expand the ribs, expand the belly, relax the pelvic floor, and exhale, lift the pelvic floor, engage the abdominals, relax the ribs. Now, theoretically, we would want to do this not as segmented as I'm talking about. So I'm kind of pausing as I'm doing it. We would want that to be a full connected breath. And again, I don't really think you're going to be able to see a whole lot of movement going on here, but what it would look like would be this. Let me show you from the side. And I'm on my bouncy ball. The bouncy ball makes it easier, especially for pelvic floor work, for you to really feel that connection with your pelvic floor. But it's also just really great to sit on because you can keep your legs wide and your belly fits. So I've got my hands on my ribs and on the back, and I'm going to start with my inhale. One more time. So with that, you may have been able to see just that slight movement through the ribs, that little bit of engagement and almost maybe a bit of a lift through my belly. And what this does is it teaches us to not just pull up and tighten the pelvic floor muscles, which is what a lot of pelvic floor work focuses on, but also on relaxing and also in incorporating the breath. I've thrown a lot of information at you here, so I'm going to summarize a little bit just to, again, help you discern whether breath work could be right for you during your pregnancy or not. And the first is to look at what kind of breath work am I doing? Is it something that's on a little more on the intense side, like holotropic breath work, or is it something that's a little bit more gentle? Is it something that is just a short few minutes of different breathing exercises like I might find in a yoga class? Is it a longer session? Is it a shorter session? Other things we want to consider is, have I done breath work before? If not, is there a trained facilitator that I work with who I trust and who has the experience creating a safe and relaxing and supportive container for a woman who is carrying a child? I'd also encourage you to look at your intention. What are you wanting to work through? What's the reason you want to do breath work? Is it to release? Is it to process trauma? Are there some fears that you're wanting to navigate? And if so, is it more beneficial for you to work through those things before baby comes? Or is it better for you to wait until after baby comes? And lastly, we can look at, how could breath work support me during my pregnancy? Do I need to do a longer session? Is there something shorter that I could do? Could I simply practice some short breathing techniques that can help me prepare my body for labor, or to just give me a bit of time and space in my day? So my friends, I've given you a lot to think about. I will leave you with that, but if you do have any questions about this, please feel free to pop them in the comments below and I will do my very best to get back to you. But once baby comes, probably not going to be on the old YouTube a lot, but anyway, leave those questions below. If this was helpful to you, please be sure to like. You can subscribe to be notified when I release more videos about breathwork and nervous system health and all of the wonderful things I love to talk about. And if you have a pregnant woman in your life, feel free to share this video with her if you think it would be of benefit. All right, my friends, thank you so much for your time and your energy, and I will catch you in the next video.